The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most complex conflicts in the world. The conflict has been going on for over 100 years, and there is no easy solution in sight. The two sides have very different visions for the future of the land, and there is a deep mistrust between them. In this video, I will discuss the origins of the conflict, the significant events that have taken place, and the current situation. The origins of the conflict. The land that is now Israel and Palestine was once part of the Ottoman Empire. In the late 19th century, a movement called Zionism began to emerge among Jews who wanted to establish a Jewish state in the region. Zionism was based on the idea that the Jews had a historical right to own this land. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, tells the story of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt and their journey to the Promised Land. This story is seen as a promise from God that the Jews will one day return to their homeland. The first time Jews settled in Palestine was in the 2nd millennium BCE. They conquered the land and established several kingdoms that lasted for centuries. In the 1st century CE, the Jews were expelled from Palestine by the Romans. Romans besieged and destroyed Jerusalem between 66 and 135 CE. These battles were known as Jewish-Roman Wars. Eventually, the Romans expelled the majority of the Jews from the land and forbade them to return to the city. The remaining Jewish population was scattered throughout the world, and they did not return to Palestine in large numbers until Zionism emerged in the late 19th century. The Ottoman Era. The Palestinian Arabs also lived in the land when it was part of the Ottoman Empire for about 400 years, from 1516 to 1917. The Ottoman Empire conquered Palestine from the Mamluks in 1516 and ruled it as part of the province of Syria. During this time, Palestine experienced a period of relative peace and stability. The Ottomans built roads, bridges, and schools, and they promoted trade and commerce. They also allowed religious freedom for all faiths, including Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Arab Revolt of 1916. In the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire began to decline. This led to increased tensions between the different ethnic groups in Palestine, including the Palestinians, the Jews, and the Turks. These tensions eventually led to the Arab Revolt of 1916, which resulted in the Ottoman Empire's defeat in World War I. 1917 Balfour Declaration and start of British Mandate. With the Ottoman Empire's decline and the Zionist movement's rise, Jews started to migrate to the region. The conflict between the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs started to escalate. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement announcing the British government's support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The British government was interested in controlling Palestine for strategic reasons. The declaration was seen as a way to gain the support of the local Jewish population. The Balfour Declaration had a profound impact on the history of the Middle East. The mandate gave Britain control over Palestine and the responsibility to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish state in the land. The mandate also guaranteed the civil and religious rights of the Palestinian Arabs. The declaration was met with opposition from the Palestinian Arab community, who saw it as a threat to their own national aspirations. The mandate lasted from 1917 to 1947. United Nations Partition Plan for Palestine. On November 29, 1947, the United Nations approved a plan to separate the British Mandate territory of Palestine into 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab. The Jewish state would have been 55% of the land of Palestine, with a population of 50.4% Jews and 49.6% Arabs. The Arab state would have been 42% of the land of Palestine, with a population of 89.9% Arabs and 10.1% Jews. Jerusalem would have been placed under an international regime, with its own governor and legislature. The Jewish Agency for Palestine, which represented the Jewish community, supported the plan. The Arab League, which represented the Arab states, rejected the plan. The plan was never implemented. In the months following its adoption, violence broke out between Jews and Arabs. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War. On May 14, 1948, The day before the British Mandate was scheduled to end, the Jewish leadership declared the independence of the State of Israel. This led to the First Arab-Israeli War, in which Israel defeated its Arab neighbors. Israel took control of more land than it had been allocated under the UN Partition plan. The war resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, who became refugees. In 1949, the armistice agreements were signed between Israel and its Arab neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. The agreements also created demilitarized zones along the armistice lines. Jordanian forces had control over the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, whereas Egypt retained control over the Gaza Strip. The 1967 Six-Day War. The 1967 War, also known as the Six-Day War, was a war fought between Israel and a coalition of Arab states from 5 to June 10, 1967. The war was a result of escalating tensions between Israel and its Arab neighbors following the 1949 armistice agreements. The war began when Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Israel's Air Force destroyed the air forces of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan on the first day of the war. This gave Israel air superiority and allowed it to launch ground offensives against its Arab neighbors. Israel quickly defeated its Arab enemies. It captured the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan. The war ended on June 10, 1967 with a ceasefire. The 1967 war had a significant impact on the Arab-Israeli conflict. It led to the occupation of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem by Israel, which remains a major source of tension to this day. The war also led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. 1987 First Intifada. The First Intifada was a series of resistance movements carried out by Palestinians. It was a demonstration of Palestinian frustration over Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip for the last 20 years since the Six-Day War. The Intifada began on December 8, 1987, when an Israeli truck collided with a civilian car in the Jabalia refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, killing 4 Palestinian workers. The protests quickly spread throughout the West Bank and Gaza Strip and soon escalated into violence. During the protests, Palestinians threw stones and Molotov cocktails at Israeli soldiers and settlers. Israeli forces responded with tear gas, rubber bullets, live ammunition, and tanks. The First Intifada ended with the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993. The Oslo Accords. Israel and the Palestinians signed the Oslo Accords, which were supposed to lead to a two-state solution to the conflict in 1993. In this agreement, Palestinians were represented by the Fatah, a political party founded by Yasser Arafat in 1959. The Oslo Accords were to be a major step forward to reaching peace, but they have never been fully implemented. The conflict has continued, and there have been a number of other wars and armed conflicts between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Rise of Hamas and Gaza Blockade. Hamas is a Sunni Islamist movement that was founded in 1987 during the First Intifada. The group's stated goal is to liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation and establish an Islamic state in its place. Hamas' popularity was rising among the Palestinians as they were involved in social welfare programs in Gaza. They built schools, hospitals, and mosques, and provided food and medicine to the poor. In 2006, Hamas won the majority of the seats in the Palestinian legislative election against Fatah. The election results led to a political crisis in Palestine, with Hamas and Fatah unable to agree on how to form a government. Fatah was following a more diplomatic approach, whereas Hamas was using an aggressive approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In June 2007, Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip, while Fatah remained in control of the West Bank. In response to the Hamas takeover of Gaza, Israel started to impose a land, sea, and air blockade on Gaza. The blockade had devastating effects on the Gaza Strip, including decline in the economy, with unemployment rates reaching over 50%. Shortage of food, medicine, and other essential goods. Lack of access to healthcare and education. The blockade has been condemned by the United Nations, human rights groups, and the international community. Despite the pressure, Israel has shown no signs of lifting the blockade. In fact, the blockade has been tightened in recent years, making it even more difficult for Gazans to access basic necessities. 2014 Gaza War. The 2014 Gaza War, also known as Operation Protective Edge, was a military operation launched by Israel on July 8, 2014 in the Gaza Strip. There had been ongoing clashes between Hamas and Israel. This was further escalated by the killings of 3 Israelis in the West Bank. In the end, Israel started the military operation in the Gaza Strip. The 2014 Gaza War was the third major conflict between Israel and Hamas since the start of the blockade in 2008. It was the deadliest of the 3, with a total of 2,251 Palestinians and 66 Israelis killed. The conflict also caused widespread damage to infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. The current situation. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a complex and challenging conflict to resolve. There is no easy solution, and it is likely to continue for many years to come. However, it is essential to remember that both Israelis and Palestinians are human beings who deserve to live in peace and security. There have been a number of attempts to resolve the conflict, but none of them have been successful. The two sides are too far apart, and there is a deep mistrust between them. The only way to resolve the conflict is for the two sides to sit down and negotiate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both of them. In the meantime, the conflict will continue to cause suffering for both Israelis and Palestinians. It is important to remember that this is a human tragedy and that it is in the interests of everyone to find a peaceful solution.